Hey guys, Mr. V over here doing a book review today for We All Fall Down, Living with Addiction by Nick Sheff. So this book, We All Fall Down, is basically Nick Sheff's follow-up memoir to his previous memoir, Tweak, Growing Up on Methamphetamines. Before you read this book, you definitely want to have read Tweak. I think you need to know and have read Tweak because you need to know who Nick is. In this book. He doesn't really describe who he is. In his first memoir, he describes that, where this is just a continuation this is his continuation from his first memoir. And that's why you definitely want to read Tweak. I've already read Tweak and I thought it was a great book. And he talks about rehab in his last book, but he goes much more in depth about rehab in this book. And then he just keeps talking about life after his last book. Like he even talks about the book tour, which I'll discuss more in just a little bit. And the reason I say you have to have read Tweak is you want to know who he is because he doesn't really describe that in this book. And you want to know like how his addictions were. And, again, you want to know about his rehab because he starts in a rehab in this book. And this book basically starts off like before the last book even finished. Like he even talked about writing the last book in this book. So you get to kind of see like a little more in depth at the very end of the last book, and then he continues at that point. And what was cool is in the introduction, he states the year, and I really like that. In the last book I did a review on, that was one of the complaints. I didn't know the year. I had a guess of what year it was, but he tells you which year it was. He starts in 2002, but then chapter 1 starts in 2005. That was when he was in the rehab, like 3 years later. And it was really cool because he starts by talking about Zelda. And again, that's why you have to have read the last book, because you know who Zelda is. And basically the events about when he was with her, and he talks about like how he and Zelda ended. And that's, he goes in depth about that here. And in this book, We All Fall Down, he goes much, much more in depth about rehabs. Even though he covered it slightly in the last book, I would say he goes very in depth with this book. And I would say that he makes rehab sound a lot worse in this book compared to the last book. You can see that he really does not like rehabs. And he is very hostile towards the things he said about the rehabs. Not only the people working there, but even the programs. He just is very hostile. And you can see that in this book. And it's interesting to see his perspective. You want to see what someone who has gone through rehab and survived those things and gotten off the drugs, what they feel. And you can see how hostile he is towards the rehab. And I would say that he opens up a lot more in this book than the last book. Like he was always open. In the last book, he talks about himself doing drugs. He talks about meth and heroin and he talks about all that. But I would say he's a lot more open with like how he felt about the rehabs, because he even reveals in this book like that he was gaming the rehab in terms of like he was saying things just to get out of the rehab. He didn't really believe in what he was doing in the rehab. And that's why I'd say he's very open in this book as well. Like he's even more open at times to even admit that he was gaming the rehab. That I think took a lot of guts to say. And, he does that in this book. And he goes in depth about why he is gaming the rehab. And as I said earlier, he's very hostile towards the rehab. And it's very interesting seeing his perspective. And something else that's interesting in this book compared to the last book is that he seems to be addicted to lying. It's very funny that how addicted he is to lying, because he just loves doing things behind people's back. Like you see that a lot in this book. Like there's many situations where he is just lying and doing something behind someone's back. Like even his friends and all that, he's doing something behind their back. And he is basically always lying about something. Like, he just, I don't know, he just loves to lie. He really just loves to lie. And to me, when I was reading the book, when I was reading it, sometimes to me, I was like, it feels almost like he's like thinks of it as like a game. Like that's the way he like kind of like portrays it, like it's a game to him, like when he's lying. And that's why I think he's addicted to lying. I say like previously, the book was about drugs and how he was lying. He was doing things behind people's back to continue to do drugs. But this book, he's doing other things that he has to lie about. And I won't say what that is. I think you guys should read the book to say some of the things he's lying about, because there's also many things he's lying about. He doesn't just lie about one thing, but like he's lying about so many things, and you get to see it in this book. And I said, like, it feels like a game to him. He doesn't say it, but it just feels like that when you're reading it. And because of the lying, he seems like a jerk at times. Like some of the lies he does is kind of a jerk. And I'm not the only person that feels that way. If you read other people online, they felt the same thing, that sometimes he was kind of a jerk. In the end, you're still rooting for Nick, and you can see, you're still rooting for him, and you can see that he's trying to be a nice guy. But there were some lies that you look at him, you're like, you're kind of a jerk there. And I don't know, it's just interesting seeing it, and it was cool that he was open about it, and that he just talked about all of his life events, and that he was open and let you know he was lying. And you get to see what happened after the last book, like his life after Tweak. And the sad thing was, you can read it, was that like he still continued to do drugs. He gotten off drugs in the last book, but that he still continued. And he goes on his book tour. His dad is with him on the book tour for Tweak and his dad's book. I think his dad's book is called Beautiful Boy. But you get to see what goes on, like when he's on tour with a dad, and that he was even doing drugs like while he was on the book tour, which is kind of sad reading it. Like he's talking about being off drugs on the tour, yet he's still doing the drugs, and you can kind of see that. And you didn't know, like when you read some of these things, you didn't know that he was on drugs. Like if you saw him on tour, that he even admits that he feels somewhat bad about lying to the people, that like, he was back on drugs. He wasn't doing hardcore drugs anymore, but he was still doing some. And, it's kind of sad reading it, but at least he's open about it. But you can really see that like drugs are just a lifelong battle, that he's always fighting that. And even when he goes through his periods where he's like sober, it's just like he's always fighting drugs, and you can just see how tough a battle it is. And you see that a lot in this book, which is very interesting. Now, some of the things I didn't like about the book, I felt that some parts stretched a little bit too long, because some chapters were just repeating the same old ramble that he was saying in previous chapters. As you know how he feels about people, and you know how he feels about the rehabs, and sometimes he just repeats it like 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and he just keeps repeating it. And that's why some of it did stretch a bit, because I think he could have cut out some of the chapters because he's just repeating what he felt about the rehabs. But that was just some of the complaints I had. Now, as for his writing style, I thought his writing style, he had a very nice writing style, because he keeps you engaged, and he is a great storyteller. He really is. He's a great storyteller, and that's why you just want to keep reading it. The same thing was in book 1. He was a great storyteller, and he kept you engaged. And in this book was the same thing. You just wanted to keep reading it. And it was very nice that he was just very direct. And he just lets you know his true feelings. Even when he's lying or something like that, he just lets you know he's direct. And I think that really a lot of fun for a book like this. And it's really very interesting for these types of books. And overall, the writing style, is very similar to book 1. The only difference, I would say, was that this one needed a little more editing than book 1. I think that book 1 had a better editor, because I said there were some parts where he kind of just kept saying the same things over and over. But even some of the words he was using, or some of the stuff he was writing, just was a little better in book 1. That's all I'll say in Tweak. It was a little better, but still it wasn't too bad. It was still pretty good. But overall, I would definitely recommend this book for people who enjoyed Tweak. If you have not read Tweak, don't even think about this book. Go and read Tweak. But if you enjoyed reading Tweak, I would recommend that you guys go out and you follow Nick Sheff's life for a couple years after the last book. But if you guys have any comments or questions, please post it in the comment section below, because I would love to hear your comments or your opinions. I hope you guys click the subscribe button, as I always upload multiple different book reviews. But thank you for watching my book review today. This is Mr. V. Go enjoy reading.